Howdy, hobby friends. Today, I'm on a side quest, and I'm putting together a mob of peasants for Barons War, for a new mercenary company, as yet unnamed, that I'm putting together. The honest truth is that I was actually going to put together a Bretonnian warband for Mordheim that I was going to use to complement my Marienburgs, as it were, to ensnare an unsuspecting friend of mine into the wonderful world that is tabletop wargaming. However, I fell down a rabbit hole, and next minute I have enough miniatures, rulebook, expansions, etc. to make 2 different 1,000 point companies for Barons War. So I've made a conscious effort to fight my overwhelming urge to kit bash everything, as I'm wont to do. I've stuck pretty much to the Peasant Levy, a couple of borrowed bodies from a sprue of the Dark Ages army builder, both Wargames Atlantic, and I think a singular head from a Frostgrave Knight sprue. I've also kept the weapons away from pitchforks and farm implements. They're basic and crude, but I wanted them to feel more like aspiring sellswords, wanting to change their stars, so to speak, rather than a bunch of farmers that have been rounded up. I imagine them to be the camp followers of the mercenary company, aspiring to join the ranks of the well-paid. I have to say, Wargames Atlantic sprues have come a long way. The Dark Ages army builder, you can tell, is an older sprue. The details are slightly softer, as it were, and more mould lines, whereas the Peasants Levy, there's almost no mould lines for the win, as it were, and all the details are sharper, as it is. It's really a cracking kit. Normally, I'd paint the miniatures and then stick them to the base, but these are peasants. I'm not going to spend hours lovingly painting each individual one and sticking them on. They're going to get knocked about, beaten up, all the rest of it, as it were. So I'm going to sprue them to the bases just to make sure there's a really strong bond. My current favourite method of priming is a Xandri dust, spray painted over, and then an overbrush of white. I tend to find Xenothals from spray cans either come out grainy or they obscure details. If you've got a good name for this mercenary company of mine, I've got none yet that comes to mind, please leave it in the comments down below. First up, everybody's getting 2 coats of dark warm flesh from Procryl. That's a great one to start off with because you get all the skin covered and then you can go over with all your contrast paints. The contrast paints go over it really well too, which is another reason to do it first, as it were, and then you come back at the end and do a bit of touch-up. Also, I've got to say, I didn't have any contrast paint green that I liked, so I just knocked it together using Biltan Shade and, base Caliban Green. I just mixed them together in a watery mix and it seemed to work quite well. So as you can see, everything's got like a green colour on it. That's the unifying colour. And then for the rest, it was just dark, earthy tones that you imagine you'd find. The key to keeping things moving along is making decisions that go on every model. Basilicalum Grey, for example, is what I used for all the shoes and all the leather. You just got to make choices like that and it speeds you up so fast. Basilicalum Grey, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, however it's said, is a great colour. I find it's like a dark brown, almost black. It's just this really dark leather color. It's perfect, and it doesn't look cartoonish like some of the other ones like snakebite leather can do.
And here's a tip I never knew I needed. If you dry brush white over Xandri dust and then paint it with Drakenhof Nightshade contrast paint, you essentially get 90% of the effect of, painting it a dark grey and then dry brushing up through the layers instantly. Seriously, crack a tip, we'll be using it again.
Once everything was tidied up, I came back over with a bit of Gulliman flesh tone over the dark warm flesh, as it were. It gives a lovely, great, warm colour. It just works. It's just magic. And then also, because of that warm glow that it gets, when you put a blue base glaze over it, say Fenrisian Grey or a Drakenhof Nightshade, as it were, to create stubble, it's great contrast. For the bases, I wanted a muddy field, and I wanted to keep it simple and quick. So what I did was I slapped on a bunch of Rhinox hide base paint, as it were, quite thick and heavy, and just paddled it on with a flat brush all over. One thick coat, not 2 thin ones, was the go here. Once it dried, I got out some of the Ard coat, coated that over, nice and thick as well, made that nice, slick, muddy effect. The Rhinox hide has a great red undertone that makes you think of red clay. And then obviously the Ard coat is that slippery moisture on the top, as it were. But it also serves 2 purposes, because I then get out my tufts of grass, and I use the Ard coat basically to glue my tufts of grass in place. When placing the tufts of grass, try to do a mix of varying types, as it were. all of a similar tone, some a bit longer, some a bit darker, but all kind of married together as it were. And as I place them, I make sure there's appropriate gaps between the tufts of grass so that you can still see the wet effect coming through. The shields were surprisingly straightforward. Basically, you just sponge on some dark green in this case, then some lighter green, colours of your choice as it were. And then after Googling some basic patterns for shields of the era, I used some thin Tamiya masking tape, put them on in a few different styles, sponged some white over it, peeled them off, and then did some chipping. After that, shield's done, and it was really satisfying to boot. Now, don't forget your base rims. I use Sharpie Earth Tones acrylic brush tip pens. Bit of a mouthful, I know. They have got to be the best hobby bang for buck out there. $20 to $30 as it were from Officeworks I paid, something like that. You can get them everywhere online all over the world, and they work great. For someone like me with dodgy eyes and shaky hands as I'm an old man, they work great for freehanding, graffiti, base rims as it were. Many jobs. Get yourself a pair. Get yourself a set. Now out comes my very handy Necro Scunge acrylic wash. Made a couple of videos on this, oil-based and water-based, acrylic-based here, as I'm using now. So if you want to see those, look down below. Otherwise, it's pretty easy to apply. I basically just use a number 8 brush, as it were. I splooge and splodge it all over. Then I clean the brush off and come back in and wick out the excess, in particular paying attention to the faces. I do find that the green-brown of Necro Scunge is a great filter, especially for these. I mean, I use it for Necromunda, but it works well on these peasants. Well, there we have it, hobby friends. Don't forget, if you have a good name for this mercenary company I'm putting together, please leave it in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, as it were, to follow on and see how it develops. In the end, I managed to get these done with about 1 hour of assembly and then about 3 hours of paint time, but not bad for 10 guys. I'm pretty happy with them. So until next time, hobby friends, thanks for watching.